Cool.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So this is the first conversation slash debrief between the Sourcekeeper gathering and the Village Playground gathering. Um, do we think we need more context for sharing at this, or do we just want to do like a light round of checking in on how are we feeling, some introductions of like who are we to each other kind of thing? Because I think some of us, not all of us have met before, and we don't have common knowledge of how each of us knows each other, though I would say there's some shared understanding that we're all a part of the same field.
Mhm. I'll just share that my the intention that kind of came through, I think, when I reached out to Narayan was just to cross-pollinate and share wisdom and insights and challenges and help support each other as community builders and stewards and weavers and organizers. And yeah, maybe there's even some sort of like collective or network-wide best practices that emerge. I'm working on a Substack article about a particular format for gatherings that I found that works really well. And um, so I just had this desire to like have different nodes come into intimacy and just contact each other and see what goodness could come from that.
Hearing that, I'll chime in just with my curiosity around I'll say the biggest goals and maybe the like originating seed motivations for, I'm going to say both gatherings, actually, and kind of afterwards to look back and kind of go on like, oh, how did that turn out relative to our early, desires and or, hopes and expectations. So,
Mm.
so that's something that I'm interested in, as well as just, yeah, compare and contrast and even down to things like maybe the like ticket pricing strategies and financial models and like how, how those worked for each of us. So, but yeah, whatever.
Hmm. Um, I'll just I'll just voice something of what's present for me. Um, I actually just had flashback to a moment. I think it was around 2 years ago at Constructing Consciousness in Ontario, which Narayan, you were there, right?
Yeah.
I was there, and Cheryl and Tucker were all there together. So that's where Tucker and I met, or we met on a call prior to that, but in relation to Constructing Consciousness. And I remember in the process of that group feeling into itself and what was alive, Cheryl actually had this metaphor. I forget exactly what it was, Cheryl, but I remember these deep, kind of, almost monsters or animals deep under the water. And
Under
maybe
a
there
layer
was
of
even ice.
ice.
And there was
Yeah.
ice. Yeah. And we're kind of here at the surface, and these presences are moving deep underneath.
Mm.
I don't know to what extent I can explain exactly what's alive for me, but somehow that metaphor feels present. And I'm aware maybe this conversation ends up being more cognitive or analytical. And that's fine if that's where, if that's the energy. And the thing in me is a little bit more like tender and unconscious. And maybe it's a bit more about like, oh, here we are together. Taking in something in the here we are together and what that represents, both for us as individuals and for this field or this whatever it
Mm.
is. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, thank you, Benjamin, that you put words to something that I was feeling in a slightly different angle, but yearning for similar things. Yeah, for me, this is my first time to formally like formally get to know Cheryl and Tucker. Like formal, not in a way. It's just because I saw you guys online, maybe at LimicCon, or just we just cross paths, go to the same space but never talk to each other. And so this is the first time to talk directly to you two. And so I'm like, yeah, we can talk about the logistics and organizing and all of that analytical stuff, but I just want to get to know you two
Mhm.
specifically, and then also feel into what's emerging among us kind of thing. So I have that, but doesn't mean that, we can't talk about, what we have learned and all of that. I'm open to that as well.
Yeah. I'm a little bit sick, so my energy is lower. And I
Mhm.
think it's kind of conducive to what Benjamin and Carol have been talking about. I kind of came into this without a sense of an agenda or like needing to get somewhere by the end of the call and more of a sense of presencing with whatever comes up and imagining that there might emergently be stories from each of the gatherings that happened or even our relationship to things that happened, like Tucker was putting out. And I feel a lot of openness to flow with whatever comes up without a clear sense of like steering.
I feel I don't know. I feel a strong sense of connection with actually each one of the people on this call. And so I wonder if myself relationally is somewhat more central, although I know that there has been crossover. Um, Tucker, you and I have collaborated a little bit in the past, and we've overlapped and stuff. And I see you as really bringing strong leadership in the Boulder area with like the lighthouse projects, and caring a lot about this field that we're in. And Cheryl, I see you as someone who's also local to Toronto, a fellow new parent. So we're somewhat joined in this other context and way, and there's uniqueness there. Um, and I do sense that between the two of us, like it's almost like two groups coming into contact with one another, the VNP group and the Sourcekeeper group. Um, And maybe even more so, like maybe Tucker and Cheryl, I see you representing the constructing consciousness side, or that there's actually a different like side of the terrain that may be representing to me in this moment in this conversation. Um, and I think like noticing that difference helps me to feel. It's like there's something even more important than what we talk about, but it's the interaction between different groups and how we are coordinating at this sort of like organizing group to organizing group or a we to we conversation that could be held, which is a little bit different, I think, than sort of like a five and two or like a series of individuals. And that was actually one
Mm.
of the themes that came up in the village gathering as well. We just held a debrief with the whole group as well. And there was a view where we sort of mapped out the different we's and the different groups that had sort of come to village together and were actually able to interact at a group to group level, a we to we level within this context of 70 people. But then we showed another map that showed village playground here beside the gathering of Sourcekeepers over here, and Limicon as something that fed into both of these gatherings, and Constructing Consciousness, and the Loom gathering, and Think Better, and LSA, and the things that are already emerging out of the village gathering. And there was something about adding that temporal layer and seeing us like, what does it mean that we in the village group are imagining that there's a context that includes both of us and what came before and what is coming after, um, as a space for dialogue. So there's something that feels like that is going to be enacted in this conversation. Um, and there's a sense of excitement that I feel around not knowing what that's going to be like an encountering of the other, even though there is
Mhm.
other overlaps. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, it's beautiful. There's a gathering that I went to. Well, it's more like I would call it a festival in Portugal. It's called Gathering of the Tribes, and I like that the quality that that evokes of like, oh, we're these different tribes that are representing this meta-modern culture, you could say, or insert whatever term feels best for you, and we're kind of gathering in around the shared watering hole of our Zoom call. And yeah, I also just want to say I think there's a way to speak to some of the facts and the figures of, some of the more the who, what, when, where, and why without it becoming this like hyper rational analytical thing. Like I think there's a way to kind of speak to the quality of 35 people and 70 people and like actually feel that in our bodies as a different shape of consciousness that we can relate to, and feeling the soul qualities of different financial structures and how that shapes people's experience and their relationship to the intimacy of the gathering. So I think that there's a way that we can stay in our bodies and our souls and also talk about some of the practical aspects simultaneously. It feels like a good practice.
Yeah. I think first I want to just name context, which is I'm at a conference at OCAD University right now. And I'm actually sitting at the exact table that I was sitting at when I believe I sat with LSA for the first time.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, whoa, what a strange
Mhm.
portal this table is. But yeah, just I think feeling the weaving of what each person has shared in presencing their desires for this call, and just noticing wanting to meet each person in kind of in just your full beingness here as a check-in. And then I really James's curiosity and sensing into actually the kind of like origin seed point of these two gatherings that ended up happening at the same time. Like, how did that actually arise? How was it sourced? And then how, like, what wants to be spoken about, how it unfolded. And I imagine just even the sharing of those stories will bring so much into the field that we could just follow the aliveness and the generativity from there. Yeah, so it's here for me.
I think that makes sense, yeah, as a next step, sort of both groups sort of speaking to the source, the origin of what prompted us to create these events, and what is unfolding.
Do y'all want to start?
Maybe we could add different parts in. I have a sense in some way the source started when the five of us started meeting. So I'm like, how far back do I go? But some years we've been doing weekly meetings. And at one point we had an intuition that it would make sense to just like gather. And we gathered with just the five of us in Seattle. And that was very potent. A lot of stuff moved, a lot of clarity just from having so many hours together, really sensing in with each other. And then there was a sense from there of like, well, maybe we do this annually. Maybe we expand it. Maybe we're meeting as a pieces of a translocal village with each other. Maybe we invite more village members. And so I think that was like the original seed was probably during that gathering, although we didn't have dates and a guest list and all the other details, but we just knew we wanted to do something that was maybe 2 years ago, 1 year ago, August.
Are the
Now, I
five of you
think.
called something? Are you a particular group?
VNP has been the acronym that we've used, Village Network Playground. I believe. And yeah, and so then we ended up calling the gathering the village playground gathering. So we, hopefully didn't confuse ourselves too much, but, fairly closely aligned with kind of the central organizing, um, I think principles of what is this quintet crew, organized around coming together in the, kind of the other aspects of, you might say villaging, but really I'd say like the economic side and the concrete, practical life side of, hey, we're in this scene sometimes like a lot of relational practices, and a lot of expertise that is unusual in the conventional world, but almost to the extent that there's this lack or shadow around, well, what about money? And what about economics? And what about the practicalities of life? So that's a an important part of the purpose of the crew to me. And yeah, then that came forth, I think, as well in this gathering, but not very directly, certainly not very kind of like on the nose, and kind of dancing around with the multiple layers of individually each person coming to this gathering. What is your village? What is your relationship to village? And how and who and how do you want your village to be and to evolve, over time? And the aspect of, oh, we people are coming together and there's a play, there's a LARP, there's a kind of like, oh, what villagey aspects are there in us coming together for a few days? We are not all each other's village, each other's people in that deepest sense, but coming together for a temporary time in a temporary context, even a, summer campy kind of context where we're not cooking our own meals. A lot of things are easy, provided for us, but what is it like to come together and consider these same dynamics of villaging and relationships and what's the phrase? Relationships of deep mutual support and thriving or thrival. Yeah.
Hmm. Can I ask for, I have a curiosity about what village means and when you're using this term, how is it different than tribe or family or network?
Oh, I think I'll get to that answer. But there's a bit more story, at least for me, in getting here, which is when we formed VNP, we would meet sort of like weekly or multiple times. We have 139 official calls together under our belt over 2 years.
Wow.
Official because we've also had soul calls and we've also had ad hoc calls and all of these other things, but like official like sequence of calls. We're on call 140 will be next Monday or Tuesday, I forget. Um, and we would be running economic. We got like a $5,000 grant. Um, we'd been running a little experiments that actually had us doing economic interactions with one another, which was sort of like early days. And for me, I started to notice that the rest of our family life kept getting entangled in things as we were running these economic experiments amongst each other. And so our awareness was like, right, it can't just be this group of friends who's doing this thing, but it's starting to pull in family. And so a part of the seed for the village gathering, um, was could we create a context in which we could imagine inviting our families so that we see the fact that it's not just some people gathering within a village, but our village actually includes all of the families that compose this village. And
Hmm.
so every single one of the organizers brought family to this gathering, and we got to see how that actually shifted our like what it was like to gather with each other,
Mhm.
which was largely speaking, I mean, we had two criterias for people coming. One, are you interested in learning how to village or like inquiring about villaging as a thing? And two, do we feel like you are as a person are a part of our village? And so that second criteria points to what village means to each of us. Earlier, before the gathering, we actually invited people to make on Miro, draw us a map of what your village is to see if we had shared understanding of what people mean by villaging, by village. And most people drew a social network map of that may have included clusters like people I work with, people, my family, and my friends. We could have just said, draw me a social network map of your social network. And there was kind of only one person, and it was Xavier, who put my barista at my coffee shop. And that sort of like stretched our understanding of like, oh, what actually composes a village? Is it the other people? When we're doing this village gathering, does it include the camp staff? Are they a part of our LARPing village? And so I think we're starting to understand some of the edges in our collective thinking about villaging without necessarily saying what it is. It seems that it's clear that it's a network of our relationships, but does it include others that are more infrastructure or invisible to this as well?
I think also since the beginning, I've been defining it more in terms of functions. Like right at the beginning of the five of us gathering, I drew a skeleton with different like organs and pieces of like this part of a system like provides this kind of function for the whole to thrive. And I think when I made the village map, it was also like connection and co-regulation and learning and like growth and taking care of each other when we're sick and like the things that feel in my body like what village is as I'm using that word, which is something uh like looking at the ecosystem level of a resilient long-term high trust network sustaining itself. And so it also involves economics and like all of the learning and exploration and digestion of what's required to have things flowing.
Mm.
Yeah, I can add a little bit. From my vantage point. Uh, yeah, actually, before the village crew, um, I started hosting Reimagine Livelihood cohorts to explore our relationship to money, livelihood, and wealth. And out of that, um, there, yeah, I felt myself there is a yearning to continue experimenting rather than just having a cohort and learning about, these alternative ways of relating to those things. And yeah, and then one of the experiment is to, yeah, so I think that was when Benjamin and Teresa reached out to me and we started talking about livelihood experiments. And then, yeah, and then this village idea start to emerge. And we invited Narayan, and then later on, maybe half a year later, we invited James. And here actually there is a thing that I think Teresa started drafting. Oh, is it not? Oh, it's too long? Okay. Well, okay. Let me she started drafting a vision for our crew a long time ago. That was almost 3 year 3 years ago. It says I'll just read one paragraph maybe. We envision a relationally resilient, geographically distributed village of people, enabling a deeper sense of stability in all areas of life for every member. As we learn and move toward this, we see the village catalyzing collective nourishment, from knowledge transfer to livelihood to increased social, mental, and physical health. The culture holds an ethos of supporting one another's thrival through our everyday decisions and allocations of resources. Yeah, in some ways, I think now I can see that vision at the early stage. There was a little bit of blueprint around, alternative ways of relating to materials, resources, finance. But it really, at the very beginning, we are thinking about village as we have to, like what Cheryl was saying, bring our whole selves into it in the first place, rather than just constrain us on one dimension for this village to work. And so we started experimenting all kinds of different things from there. And then this gathering is the latest experiment.
Mm. Maybe I'll just add one or two other small pieces to complement um, in terms of the origin of this particular gathering. At the beginning of this year, we ended up in one of our calls having a diagram that looked like a funnel, or we refer to it the word funnel, even though that's maybe not the best word for it. But basically, people at the top of the funnel are basically just like newer to us or newer to this world, whatever this world is. But just coming into contact with it for the first time, or there's more distance. And then people at the bottom of the funnel are like, running Limicon or gatherings, or at least attending to them. They're kind of swimming in these waters. They're really familiar with it. And so there was a sense of something felt called for at the lower level of the funnel. Um, and so that really informed the fact that like this gathering that we just ran, both a lot of the folks would be familiar whether they use the term villaging or something else. They're like doing it. A lot of them are like doing it, quite interested in it in their lives. And also we had pre-existing relationships with all of them, or pretty much everyone. And I think that ended up being a pretty important facet of what this experience was like for us. Like it would have been very different running what we just ran with 70 people that we've not met before. There were long-standing relationships that have been cultivated over like many, many years. That's an important part of understanding what happened, I think. So that's one piece. And then the other piece is just around the language of like village and villaging. We did create a printout. We called it an orienting artifact because sometimes, people find themselves at these gatherings and there's so many different frames and it's like, oh my God, what's even going on? Like what can be hard for the group to find coherence around an outer frame. So we did create this orienting artifact that had some things like written down, kind of distilled. And we did have a definition of villaging in there as a verb. We did not have a definition of village defined. And I think in some sense, I'm almost relating to it kind of metaphorically as like, or playfully or poetically. It's like what I'm really yearning for is an outer context that provides us the clarity to feel cohered together, but also is open enough that like all of us in our full individuality, in what we're bringing, feel like we have the space to show up fully. And so I think that was kind of the edge that we were playing on, or that I felt us playing on, is as hosts, what are the pieces that we define? Where do we choose to use definition, or more like a yang type energy to really like clarify and hold something, because that point is like an important point that the group field is going to orbit around or something. But then also, where do we not define? Where do we like, yeah. I feel like that learning edge, for me at least, is very central around power and attention. Feels very alive.
Yes.
Amazing. I have if we do decide to share this publicly, I'm sensing it might be helpful for those listening just to have kind of like a basic understanding of the gathering, like our 70 people in this place for this many days, just like
Seven.
a kind of a 101 type of thing.
Yeah, I probably should have shared this at the beginning so you can actually picture this. In Southern Ontario, just outside of Kitchener-Waterloo, at my old summer camp that I spent probably 4 years working at. We had 70 people, including a 6-month-old baby, up to a couple folks in their 80s, but mostly clustering age-wise, probably around 30s, early 30s, mid 30s, 40s, kind of thing. We had beautiful weather the whole time. just turning fall, but unseasonably warm. So we were swimming. We had canoes, kayaks, high ropes, low ropes. It was summer camp. We started the whole thing off singing a camp song, which led into our opening ceremonies and such. We had space for movement and dance. People stayed in cabins. They were clustered into cabins with maybe like around 10 people in each. Some people were in tents. It was 5 days long. The last day was optional as an optional sort of like sense-making day. I think roughly like 60 to 70% of people stayed the full duration. Um, yeah. And very few people knew everybody. About a third of the people were in the deep relating sort of like LSA kind of network, learning space. About a third of the people flew in from out of town. Um, and maybe a third of people were like family in some way.
Yeah, we had
And
Super helpful.
13 kids under 18.
Amazing.
And so the 3 days in the middle were the full days, and the first two of those days were structured using open space primarily, except for the evenings, which were more kind of planned, cozy, heart-centered. And the third full day was that what now sense-making day that Narayan referred to.
Mhm. Love it.
Shall
I'm getting
we
FOMO.
shall we hear some more about the gathering of Sourcekeepers?
Sure. I can start to share, and then yeah, Cheryl, I'd love for you to weave in your threads. Um, well, maybe just to give a 101 similarly. So we were 4 nights, 5 days. I believe that's accurate. It was outside of Asheville, North Carolina, in a small town called Marshall at the Pramba Institute, which is it's a spiritual intentional community that also has a retreat center that they rent out to outside groups. Beautiful space. We met on the 1 year anniversary of Hurricane Helene, which devastated that area in particular that we were in. And so we had a pre-gathering day where folks did a community service project at a nearby also an intentional community that had tiny homes to house those who lost their homes in the hurricane. And so there was a lot of context awareness of the place that we were meeting in and why we were meeting there. And at that point, there were 35, actually 36 people that joined in person, and then we had four, 5 or 6 folks Zoom in from. They were mostly teachers and elders that we called in that were all over the world. And yeah, I would say a lot of folks knew a lot of folks there, but there were also several folks who only knew maybe 1 or 2 or 3 people. Um, there was quite an intimate web from the Church of the Intimate Web field that was gathered there. And then there was some folks from more the Constructing Consciousness or GT, Pacific Integral GTC Collective. And then a lot of folks that are just from throughout, I would call it the broader Metamodern network. People came from South America. One person was living in Mexico. Several folks from Canada, a couple of folks from Europe, and yeah, so all over the world. Maybe 10 people were from the Asheville area, so there was a good deal of locals, which was really lovely. In terms of well, I guess and then the structure of the gathering was basically we had an opening ceremony on the first day in the evening, and then we had 3 full days, so very similar format to it sounds like what y'all did. And in the mornings, we had more structured offerings up all the way up through lunch, and then in the afternoons, we had open space time slots, and there were many open spaces that were offered, probably over 20 over those 3 days. And then on the last day, we had more of a closing ritual and ceremony, people sharing their vows and commitments. And yeah, I think one of the highlights of our gathering, which I'd love for Cheryl to touch on, is like the amount of ritual and ceremony and different ways that the earth and the larger field that was beyond just the 35 of us gathered was incorporated into our experience together. In terms of how the gathering came to be, so I met Cheryl at the CC, the Constructing Consciousness Toronto or Ontario events. That was, I think, exactly 2 years ago. And yeah, I remember like my one point of connection with her was drinking coffee early in the morning that I just really remember so well and feeling like, I met a new friend and it seemed like an important friend, like not just any friend, but someone that I would, you know, deepen into a relationship with in some way. And at some point in the coming months, we had a number of calls and felt a lot of creative energy between us. And there was this idea to do a soul makers gathering in France, France at Life Itself in Bergerac, with Sylvie and Rufus, who have now become important collaborators and friends in our field as well. And so we did that retreat together, and it went really well. It was with a smaller group of folks, and then, yeah, after that point, I kind of stepped away from from hosting and organizing the CC gatherings because I wanted to make room for some different type of gathering offering to kind of come through. I didn't quite know what that looked like. And Cheryl and I had a call one day just on Zoom like this, and she's like, "So what do you think you're gonna do next?" And I had no idea. I said, I don't know. And then, like, literally within a split second, all like the idea for gathering the source keepers just lightning striked into awareness. And I said, gathering of the source keepers in Asheville with Daniel Thorson and with you and with the Church in the Intimate Web. And let's do it as it relates to to Hurricane Helene and have it also be a service-based project. And yeah, I didn't even know what source keeping meant. Like that was a term that I think I heard Cheryl use and talk a lot about, but I didn't really have my own way of relating to that word at that time. But it felt like there was a potency in it that I could connect to. And yeah, and Cheryl just kind of like her face lit up and she was really excited and then messaged Daniel Thorson and asked him if he wanted to be a collaborator on the project. And he immediately responded with a yes. Um, and it all kind of just started from there. Um, and yeah, something that was beautiful that came, we can touch on this after. I don't want to go too much into it, but in the midst of the gathering of the Source Keepers, there was also this idea for creating a guild together. And that idea is interesting because it's based off of a website called I forget what it's called, but I can put the link in the Zoom channel here, and it's was created by Sylvie and Rufus at Life Itself as sort of a blueprint for how guilds could come together. And so it's just interesting that like the Soul Makers Gathering, where Cheryl and I first collaborated with Sylvie and Rufus, also was like the place where this guild idea is coming that was then birthed from the Source Keepers Gathering, and now that's what we're working on together. And now there might be a Source Keepers Gathering in Europe next year in collaboration with Sylvie and Rufus as part of a guild kind of branded gathering as well. So there's just a lot of like enfolding waves that are all kind of collapsing and co-creating one another, which feels really cool. Yeah. Cheryl, I'm curious what you would add your own flavor to all this.
That was no, that was just really concise storytelling. Um, yeah, when yeah, if I were to tune into what else wants to be spoken to, it feels yeah, how do I share this? I think I'm feeling a lot of resonance and actually admiration for the way that the the village crew here is sensing into what the kind of villaging as verb, as active process is unfolding as through relationship, through family, through, yeah, it feels really truly co-created and highly emergent. And that's really, yeah, so I think I just really, I'm holding that and I'm noticing that I share a lot of that shape in the way that I also feel called to stewarding, like maybe what I would gesture towards like sacred culture or the future that kind of wants to birth through me and my relationships. My deepest roots in the way that, yeah, I feel like I am guided, and some of like the source keeping and soul making language is also about helping others remember, but also like finding the others who already do orient via soul, and a kind of soul sensing, and this way of looking outwards and seeing place, seeing existing relations, seeing how we are already intimately entangled. Yeah. And then also attuning to like a deep, almost like the echo of the future that already lives in you. And sourcing from that place, like knowing that, oh, this desire or this aliveness or this eros is oriented as some kind of, yeah, deeply embodied, both like source of aliveness and energy and generativity, and like a way of being able to then find the others. And then also it has usually quite clear and precise instruction as well. It's like quite a clear navigational and discernment. Yeah. Yeah, just like source of knowing. So so much of, I think, the way that we orient around the way we were gathering was always around almost asking folks to really tune into that deep sense of a soul yes. So what does it mean for you to know as though the yes has been there all along, and showing up into the next step, into the next, you could say, evolutionary leap, is just finding that resonance that's often much more subtle and responding to that call. So I think in that sense, we foreground actually much more of, you could say, a kind of spiritual awareing as, yeah, as a way of tuning into coherence and creating and building from that way of sensing together. I feel like that wasn't quite explaining the gathering, but it feels like almost like some of the essences and qualities wanted to be shared as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll add on to that in a way we were gathering as village as well, but the way that we were incorporating village was actually an imaginal village of the future that is already alive and breathing as an emanating being that we can contact and be in relationship with in the now, as a source of our soul longings and aliveness towards that which we're calling forth, and that which we're becoming by being, like by embodying as best we can the future that is calling us forth. We are actually bringing that future towards us simultaneously. And so it had a very, yeah, shamanic or alchemical or kind of a more mystical orientation in how we were holding it. And it really did feel like Village was alive in the field and constantly being referenced, but it was being referenced almost as like a temple that lives in our hearts, you could say. and less as a concrete reality that we presently have. And there was some, I don't know how alive this was collectively, but this was in me a little bit of like actually not wanting to say this is village now, because there was a sense of like the actual village that I feel in my soul I, and like this the soul vision I is concretely a very different place than 35 people for 5 days at a retreat center. Like that has a quality of a family gathering, you could say, or a bunch of friends hanging out for a few days. But the actual infrastructure and the systems and the cultural practices and the time and the space and the devotion and the deep ecology of relationships that can only really play out over decades, if not generations, feels quite far off actually from where we are in our modern world right now. And I felt like the conservative in me, like the traditionalist in me was saying like, well, hold on now. Like, let's tap into that real, objectively, imaginally real place that is the full emanation of this, while also acknowledging that we have a ways to go in this concrete material manifestation of our current moment in time, and that is a that requires a devotion that is a lifelong project, and probably far beyond our lifetimes as well. And that brings up grief for people and for me, you know. And so we also had a grief ceremony for half a day essentially, where we really just like felt the full expression of our grief and our pain and our longings, and allowed our tears to fertilize the soil of our holy potential, you could say. So yeah, it might be worth sharing these three documents. One is a PDF that Cheryl wrote, that's just a gorgeous transmission of source keeping. The other is about soul work as source keeping, something that I wrote. And then the third is about metamodernism, which is a term that we were using a lot to describe this imaginal village, and also our the culture building that we're doing here and now by gathering. And so we were perhaps a bit more explicit about what this particular culture is that we're calling forth, and really inviting an awareness of the specificity around some of these terms. But that didn't really come up in an intellectual way during the gathering. It was kind of like that was some of the pre-gathering reading material. And we had 3 Zoom calls prior to the gathering where people could really kind of sink into that content. And then once we were in person, it was much more, you know, sort of relationally focused and less about a conceptual framing of what's to come.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, just listening to the two of you, I just feel music to my heart. Um and yeah, for me, what you were talking about, that village in your soul or in your heart, like yeah, I think I'm borrowing a phrase from um maybe someone else, and then that phrase kind of stuck with me, is a world that my heart knows possible.
Hmm.
I start to feel this more and more and more and more. Um, and and then the left brain want to try to figure out, how do we get there? How do we make it, manifest? And then, but I st- and then I used to be like, oh, if I can't figure it out, step by step, then it doesn't exist. It doesn't, it's not real. But now I started to really shift to really center that, what my heart knows is possible. And then that doesn't have a sense of space or time. It's beyond that. Um, yeah, so what you said just really kind of like made that really um resonate for me. And then my feeling of, while at the village gathering and also leaving the village gathering, I just feel so much more clarity. Like, wow, this is worthwhile. this is like there is something that is dragging me toward it. Whether and then dragging this group of people, toward it, even though we might not be able to articulate it in the same way. But yeah, yeah. So it just sounded very much the same to what you two were describing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so cool to feel how our, different gatherings, but different instruments playing the same song, it sounds like.
I was smiling when you said grief ceremony because that was a major feature in ours as well, that a bunch of different participants from different regions collaborated on creating together, and in sort of a lot of people's shares about what was most impactful, the grief ceremony seemed to play quite a pivotal role in the overall unfolding.
Mm. Can you share more about how that was, yeah, facilitated or held, or any um, percolations from that experience that remain in your hearts?
Carol and I were co-creating it based on multiple experiences we had had of being held in grief ceremony spaces, some day-long spaces, multiple, also just movements of emotions in big ways with large groups. And so it was interesting trying to design it, because there was a sense of like, we're probably not going to take a whole day, but we want to create something with enough structure that we could emerge into it and emerge from it live with all the different people that are going to be there, which was an interesting design for us of like family and people that don't have any sense of this kind of gathering, and people that want to go really deep. And how do we do something that holds all of that? But it ended up being very co-created with different people creating the space. We were outside under a large tree, and we set up a lot of like coziness, and we had a song that everyone learned. And then for the core of it, after we had kind of like all landed in the space together, we all just sang this song, and different people went and moved emotions in large ways towards the altar and the tree. And it's interesting because now I'm like, what if we were doing that on the same day? I felt very connected to something larger that was being grieved through us.
Mm.
Mm.
Mm. It's beautiful.
That was a Sunday or Saturday?
Okay.
Saturday.
Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday.
Yeah. Yeah, what's interesting, really kind of interesting learning for me was none of us, so there are quite a Sandra was one of the key kind of key source of this. None of and also we invited someone else who has more knowledge of kind of this shamanic kind of how to do the ritual of a grief ceremony, but but then she doesn't have a whole lot of time to actually do the whole thing because she has a young daughter to take care of. So then none of us are key kind of like holders of the space have real deep knowledge or experience with how to, because it takes a lifetime to learn how to hold, these rituals in those indigenous cultures. And none of us want to claim, oh, we know how to do this. And so there were definitely doubts moving toward there. And then we decided to be like, you know, we don't we might be messing up with a lot of like those knowledge about the rituals per se, but we're not going to claim this is from, any of those lineages. This is just us really yearning to move something within us, and we're going to
Mhm.
create we're going to create the space, the holder, the container for that genuine and authentic thing to move through us. And whatever that looks like, so be it.
Mm.
and not worry about, oh, are we authentic? Are we knowledgeable? Are we, good enough to hold such a sacred thing? Like, you know, as long as what's within us is authentic, then it will be sacred. Like, and so that was what helped us to move through the doubts. And also, some kind of emergent leadership that emerged at the last minute through Sandra. Like,
Mm.
because there's also a lot of cooks in the kitchen, when people want to chime in. And then finally, Sandra felt like, oh, maybe this is, you guys want me to lead? We're like, yes, please. And she just took on this director role of like, Carol, you do this, Teresa, you do this. And, like, it was just, it all came together. And the land, um, Maggie chose the land. Yeah, it's just everything came together the last minute. Yeah.
Mm. Beautiful. I'm so curious because your group size was exactly double our group size, and the largest gathering that I've ever organized or facilitated was 45 people. And yeah, I'm just trying to imagine herding 70 cats and what what how did you do that? Like was there one person in your group that was kind of the leader in terms of saying like, okay, everyone, it's this time to go in this place and like time to go, or was it more like you had a predetermined schedule and people could kind of flow in and out as their bodies desired, or yeah, how did that work?
Yeah, we held it from the beginning as like, we have a schedule, but no one needs to come to anything. And the schedule is there to support. But if you just want to show up and be in the space and do whatever makes sense for you, that's welcome. And that was part of it, was because it was such a divergent group of people coming in that all had different desires and reasons for being there.
Mhm.
So it was like, how do we actually design something that holds it, but allows that emergence? So I don't think
Mm.
there was maybe a single thing that every single human was at. Like kids had different bedtimes. So the opening ceremony, already some people were in bed. Some of the younger kids, like under 4, were like attentionally, it was like they needed to play while we were doing something. So there was, yeah, there was a lot of flexibility around that. The grief ceremony
Mm.
maybe was 15 or 20 people. It wasn't 70.
The
Mhm.
one thing that was set in stone was meal times because the camp was cooking for us. So if you missed mealtime, there wasn't really a plan B for you. So that meant that most people were around during meal times, either in the inside or there was an eating space outside. So we would do announcements during all the meal times. And then yeah, there were a number of times where like we had our one of the things that ended up creating a bit of logistical complexity for us is that we thought we were going to have a lot of the space just for our group, and just like a week before, we found out there were going to be some other day groups. So it meant that we couldn't do our facilitated open space at the dining hall, which meant people had to
Mm.
move physical locations. And that was one of the things logistically that created the most complexity, because it meant we couldn't as organically just roll from dinner into open space setup. You did have to kind of, shepherd people to wrap up their meal and to move up to the other space. So that took us a little bit of time. There were some sessions that started a little bit late. I think that we tried to both, remind people, but also be like gentle about it. So that energetically people didn't feel too pushed around. I think that we shared a good amount of those duties. And it was probably one of the places which, if we were to do it again, we might have like a little bit more definition internally about who's going to do what ahead of time, what announcements have to happen during which meals. So I would say that we just kind of like, did it more organically. It worked fine. And also it was like a place that we noted could probably use a bit more attention if we were to do it again.
It was an edge for us as well, hosting at this size, at this scale, and with
Mhm.
this level of diversity. Like one of the differences that I'm sensing between the gathering and the source keepers and this one is we're sort of more explicitly looking at how do we welcome in people who are on the edges of this stuff, people for whom the word metamodernism wouldn't make any sense to them or it would actually repel them, while
Hmm.
also making space for the people that are like, let's fricking build proto bees and game bee and like metamodern societies and stuff like that. So all of that was in the same space. And how do we create a structure that is actually welcoming of all of those people to move more towards, I think it's like that more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible, knowing that language is going to be different. Some groups have like highly technical language to talk about this, and other groups are just sort of like considering it or considering being able to verbalize it. So I almost think that there's some lessons that we could probably take from your gathering, which feels a little bit more about like how can anyone tap into that place in their heart and to be able to do that imagination work. It like it's so cool to be able to say like what could we learn from that gathering and bring it into the next one that allows everyone to actually meet on a heart to heart connection rather, which may create coherence in a way that we like weren't necessarily paying attention to.
Mm. Yeah, one way that I this might shift, so I hold this lightly, but there's a way in which I'm really excited about gatherings that are really, really crystallizing like the core tribe family at the center of the source mandala that are all in. Like they've crossed the threshold in their heart and they're like, I am this I'll just call it metamodern culture, this more beautiful world that we're living as best we can and also moving towards simultaneously. Like that is my deep life work. That is my calling. That is what I'm here to source keep, not just through my individual projects, but as part of our collective source keeping of this shared vision, shared potential, shared feeling. And yeah, it's in that way, it's almost like calling in the family gathering. It's more of like Thanksgiving than a little bit less of like a festival where there's so many different types of people. And I love both experiences so much. And it just feels like over time I'm finding myself more more longing for like building out that strong and kind of the indestructible bonds of intimacy and relationship that really deepen and grow over time. And there's a strength in that and like investing in the curation almost of like that holding team that then could like each person in their own unique way can kind of look back out and extend a hand and kind of invite in others through their therapy work or their gathering offerings or their you know music art pieces or whatever it is. And so there's like a natural way in which it's both simultaneously, but I feel like my unique role in the constellation thus far is to kind of like lean into um yeah, a sense of like friendships that are built to last, if that makes sense. And I think that comes from my own personal like deep longing and even shadow material as well. I think is kind of wrapped into that, and I'm aware of that, and or I'm aware of the parts that I'm aware of at least, and it's kind of like our our deepest longing becomes the gift that we're able to bring to the world.
I'm hearing almost two directions, and it's like one is like building trusting relationships throughout this liminal web of people who already are sort of tuned into a particular layer or understanding. And then the other side is, well, how do we also expand the bandwidth of the existing local relationships that are already sort of surrounding us locally? And both seem to be avenues towards this like network of high trust relationships, but potentially two different paths. And I actually think that probably each one of us here is doing both of those things simultaneously.
Yeah, I think it was an edge at the village gathering. And before we hosted it, I was telling Jean, like, we're trying to serve for people that really want to connect and go really deep and our families. And she was like, I don't know how you're gonna do that. Like, I don't think you're gonna get what you
That
want.
sounds like a bad idea.
And what does it mean that our families don't want to connect and go really
Integration,
deep?
like, yeah, and part of the yearning is for that integration. Like, as part of the LSA culture, there was a lot of like, I can go to my family system, but my nervous system and the way I relate to them, it's like shaped and formed by the entire context of my history with them. And Benjamin or Julia or someone else that comes and visits my family with me sees different things. They interact differently. They start asking my family questions that I would never think were on the table to ask them. And all of a sudden, something changes. And that's been like a part of my life for years now, where it's like, oh, it's not just me that needs to go interface with my family. It's like all the people around me and my family like create something so much more coherent across my whole life. And I feel like somehow we need all of this, and it's complex. And one of the things when Benjamin was talking about the different duties, it's like each of us had our families there. There were kids, there were parents, there were partners. And I think multiple of the hosting team had like many hours where we had to divert attention away from hosting and holding the space into like challenges that our family was experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
My sister almost left at one point because it was just like a lot for her nervous system. She's been isolated for the past many years. It was like, and I knew it would be a lot going in, but I was like, we're going to try it. And it was a lot. And there was like potential leaving and lots of tending, and I went into like babysitting mode, and there were different ways that I had to show up. And although it didn't feel like splitting myself, I wasn't like, now I'm in this role or this role. It was like an integration across like very basic tending to like people that are not already having the nervous system skills and the like familiarity that's just required to feel more oriented in a space, and also like powerful deep processes with the people that I already had those deep connections with. And there was something for me personally, like for my own self, that integration and a sense of like that can all be one in the same place, and witnessing that in the other hosts and some other people that brought family, like it did something differently. It felt more resilient. I think there was something like different, like I could go really deep with many people, but then it was like spread out. It was like as far as my wingspan reaches going deep. And something different was happening from that in terms of the lifelong nature of it.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it actually this came up in the opening ceremony. I think Narayan, you mentioned that, oh, now there are different, like you invited people who kn got to know you in different contexts in your life, and you invited them. They're all sitting together in that opening ceremony, and 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 it feels strange. And I even use the word naked for me because my father was there. I haven't been able to explain what I do, and then like the type of work I do to him in a way that he approves, right? But he was there even though he doesn't understand English, but he was there. So there is that I notice in myself, you know, I, there are different types of carols in front of different contexts. And there is a deeper, and I'm happy to be that. Not that I perform or change, but just naturally when contexts change, when people in front of me change, there are different facets of me that comes out. But then there's a deeper yearning in me to to be to to be whole, to bridge all of those, break those boxes for my father to know you people, like to know the people I love in my life, and that's beyond my family, biological family, if you will. And then for you to also, it takes a village to raise not just a child, but it takes village to raise a human. And so I love to bring this village that's you all to my father so that he can there are a lot of things that can be opened up that I cannot directly touch in my father. but you all might have a chance, you know?
Mm.
So that was that deeper integration piece I think we have sensed early on this year when we're sensing into ourselves that yearning to break these contextual boxes, have that deeper integration, and in some ways it actually it will also integrate the shadows in us. Because if I have a difficult relationship with my father, there's some shadow there that I'm like, okay, I'm gonna leave behind. You're in the old world. I'm going to build a new world. But but there's still a lot of shadow that I notice that's still there. But then if I can not force my father to integrate, with you all, but naturally just like have him be
Mm.
there, have him like osmosis, kind of like, experience. And you guys also helped me to see my father in a different way. Like yeah, so there is some kind of like, yeah, deeper to me, very spiritually significant um impact that happened. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to add one more story of that nature. Theory of change, osmosis, but also theory of change, just like rapid switching, and combining. But really, yeah, it's a story of integrating that depth and that breadth. And for me, that integration of, I'm going to use the word loving people in serving them as facilitator, as leader, and the way that I, love my kids, and my kids were there, ages 10 through 16 with all of their needs and their growth and developmental edges, and combining those, kind of those various aspects of depth and breadth. I found myself less even in the gathering, but like a week, 2 weeks after the gathering, like feeling changed in
Mm.
myself, and like the combination of those different relationships and those different hats that I was wearing at the gathering had somehow melded or merged, and I find myself walking around with kind of a different level of integration, or a different level of kind of like heart openness, um, or depth in the like different relationships and in the breadth of my life. So that, yeah, I'm still discovering and uncovering, unfolding the kind of integration work that the gathering was for me. And yeah, and then I just want to put an appreciation and a thank you into the space. I heard some resonance, Tucker, that you're talking about with the word villaging, but resonance and appreciation for the word source keeping as well. Um, and maybe it's that shift of taking a noun and turning it into a verb. I don't know, from source as a person, as an identity, to source keeping as a process, as a verb. But I think I want to say it was like a three-way podcast. You two and Daniel, I think, just talking about source keeping for an hour or so, that it shifted that concept and it shifted my vocabulary. And I just feel like that's been really helpful to me. And I think is helpful into that space, into this wider web space, to have that term as a verb. So just appreciation for that.
Awesome.
I'm curious, like I want to hear more again, just in our last sort of 10 minutes from Tucker and Cheryl, given what's sort of like coming up on this call and your experience with the Sourcekeeper gathering, what are some edges or paths forwards and opportunities that you might be sensing, or like glimmers from the future that sort of feel connected to this conversation?
I would love for Cheryl to talk. I know you're at a conference. It's not ideal setting, but I'm so curious to hear what's stirring in you.
Yeah, no, there's feels like there's like a veil of tears over my eyes right now. I'm so moved by the medicine of this field. Something around the kind of, my friend Dachin would call it like an intertidal meeting here. And yeah, I think there's an echo of responding to how deeply integrating as this, yeah, like whole making or individuation process that I've been on as well, of bringing like my motherhood and my husband Xavier and my baby now Io into more and more of this work, um, and feeling into also the deep challenges of that, the ways in which, yeah, I'm like confronted with. I was in a nectary gathering that was source kept by Dachin, Ellen McSweeney, and it was like a month long in Victoria. And
Oh yeah.
we were living in a house together for 12 of us for a month. Xavier and Io and I only were there for 2.5 weeks. And it was so profoundly vulnerable to just have all of the like visceral messiness, emotional, psychic, and also like literal, like, poopy messiness in the field with all of my collaborators. And to have my nervous system in the way that it is like raw in motherhood, to have that be like met and received in its edges by others. I think there's just something about it. There was so much happening there in the alchemy of it. And I completely embrace why that feels like, yeah, almost like the threshold that I feel to be at when you're asking about our edges, Narayan. Because actually, for the Sourcekeepers gathering, Tucker knows, he asked, "Oh, are you going to be bringing Io with you?" And it was really kind of like up to like the last several weeks where I was still sort of like going back and forth, like, do I want Xavier and Io there? What would that mean? And ultimately, I made the call to show up for the first time, like spend 8 days away from Io for the first time, and feel what that tether would still feel like in my body, to know that I'm still like very, in a bodily sense, like deeply bonded with my baby, but also show up and kind of like do the work that I'm here to do. And that was another experience that was like its own alchemical process as well. And I think I'm just sharing this, my own personal edges around this, because that for me is the gravity of the vow, the soul vow, to bring like all of life, all of our relations, like our parents, yeah, it's like talking about this work with the barista down the street, which I do all the time. Like I sit at the cafe and just, yeah, it's a really good practice field of talking about what is this? And to be able to do so with folks who aren't just like in the scene. And for me, so much of that actually arises out of, I think someone was describing, it's like heart resonance and coherence, because it's not really so much about the, like fancy verbiage that we use. It is for me about, yeah, it's like opening up to that beautiful future and creating these portals. It's like, here's a portal, here's a field where we actually get to live and experience together what that is. And it's medicine. It's like medicine that nourishes us and heals us. And it tastes like the possible. And then it charges you up to do the work that it takes. It's fucking hard out there. To like embody that medicine for other people, for my parents, for my brother-in-law who just lost like his baby, like one of his
Mm.
babies. Like it's like when I experience that, when I'm like, how do I show up for him right now? It's like, this is what this work is about. Um, and I feel it. I feel the benefits of the practice. I feel the benefits of the work in the way that I can show up for family in a way that I know I wasn't capable of before. And yeah, this is like a lifelong dojo, and I want to be with others in it. So, yeah, thank you.
Mm. Yeah, I think what's been coming up before Cheryl even said it is just that word medicine, feeling that the gathering of the Source Keepers as a whole was a medicine ceremony. There wasn't any plant medicine used, but the field itself was like this medicinal, um, emanating, catalyzing, co-creating, um, source of our deepest longings and joys and celebrations and life transitions and our commitments and our vows to that which we are in devotion to that which we would die for, um, to that which we would live like so fully in this life for. And more so than other gatherings, I felt a real responsibility after the physical gathering in Nashville ended to really take care of one another, to check in. Like people were having a very um, potent experiences, and there was definitely a collective state high. There was a state experience that was created by being there that I even felt, and I'm used to these gathering spaces now, and still I felt like, whoa, okay, I'm in an altered place right now. And we left and we went to a Rising Appalachia concert that was that afternoon, which was so beautiful to be at. And it was like I felt like everything was just super dreamy and surreal. And yeah, when people are when these gatherings are created, these medicine spaces that create such a high, I'm aware that there can be a crash or a feeling of disconnection from that experience afterwards. And yeah, there's some way in which I feel now that my sense of responsibility is not so much like going out and finding more folks, although that's always already happening. I feel like because of the patterns and the grooves I've kind of created as a community weaver, there's like constantly a cycle of new folks coming into my world, but it's to really like show up for the 35 people that were here now. And an example of that is just this morning we posted in our Signal group a a 3-part incubator that will be 90-minute call series for people to come and to really offer their visions, their projects, what they're source keeping in the world, and to create a mutual support network amongst each other, but also amongst all of our individual networks, and fold our individual networks into the network of the gathering of the source keepers. And eventually somebody, Forrest, might be creating a 3-month incubator that's more of a longer term sustained project to help kind of guide and shepherd people through their source keeping journeys. And so that's just one example of like these sort of threads. The guild is another thread that is weaving out. It's almost like this. It's almost like all this kind of like confetti comes together and creates this like momentous volcano of experience. And then there's like the lava kind of seeps and solidifies and creates new islands and new possibilities and new forms. And we get to go and visit each other's new islands afterwards, and then maybe there's a volcano that is created in that new island that creates this other thing like this, and it just kind of keeps going. And there's something that's really beautiful about that. But more so than ever, like actually feeling Cheryl as a partner and also and like my soul vow to her, as my friendship vow, like knowing that now that she's a mom, a new mom, like that raises the stakes so high for me, and it makes all of this really real. This isn't just a gathering of friends hanging out for a few days. This is deep sacred work that is directly impacting the next generation, and that is such a gift.
Feeling the gift of connectedness here as well, and such resonance and alignment that firing off in me, I have, energies towards, oh, let's connect our future gatherings. Let's connect our deep webs. Let's connect our incubators. Just so many different dimensions of inhabiting this more beautiful world and building it, and being connected in a teamness of that, and a multiplicity and a diversity and a different. I heard the word Mandela, once, and I use the word mesh sometimes, of just kind of this, borderless, edgeless, but like centers everywhere, and a deep woven web of connectivity. Mm, yeah, feeling that right now.
I was sensing in the imagery of an individual almost as a conduit between this future, the echoes of this future that we can sense with our heart, and then the other arm reaching and like coming into contact with our family and the messy reality that needs grieving, and that there's so much, and that like when those two points are anchored, and almost like this gathering of the source keeper was pointing in one direction and village was kind of pointing in the other direction, but when we anchor in both, a connection is formed. And then James, as you were speaking around sort of like our field, our mesh, yeah, some people went to this, some people went to this. Maybe collectively we actually are creating this conduit, that helps to connect the future with this present, like in some different way.
Mhm. This call feels like someone taking the two extension cords and going, shoot.
I just wanted to say, Ryan, you just said connecting the future to the present, and I resonate with that. But I also just wanted to bring in like and the past, like the past of like the deep, the deep future, the deep future, and the deep past. And it's like, in some sense, we're all working towards a world that we will never see. but and yet there's the echoes of it, and even sometimes a bit more than an echo. Like I'm really honoring that sense that you spoke to, Tucker, of like recognizing the way that it's not here. And there's also a way in which it is here for me on this call. I sense it here on this call.
Mhm.
And like, wow, that I get to live at a time when I can sense it in this way on this call.
We got to find the one that does the connection to past really well.
Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
I have a next thing, so I'm gonna have to transition off the call at this point.
Yeah, same. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. It's really an honor.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So glad we
Thank
had
you.
this. Bye, everyone.
Deep bow to everyone. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you for the good work.
Yeah.